Hey guys, thank you for watching. Today we're going to discuss a few terms here. One's called exegesis, and then its polar opposite is eisegesis. And we're also going to introduce a third word called hermeneutics. These are all very important when it comes to studying the Bible. Clinical definition of exegesis is pretty much drawing meaning from the text rather than imposing what you believe into the text. And I'm going to use a Christian Bible dictionary to further expand on this. Exegesis is the process of careful analytical study of biblical passages undertaken in order to produce useful interpretations of those passages. Ideally, exegesis involves the analysis of the biblical text in the language of its original or earliest available form. Well, let's look at its opposite, eisegesis. That's when a reader imposes their interpretation of the text. And exegesis tends to be objective, while eisegesis is highly subjective. Okay? Now let's talk about the word hermeneutics, the approach to studying the Bible, understanding the whole first by understanding the parts, the historical and the cultural aspects of what you're reading. And by repeating the process, understanding expands. That's called the hermeneutical spiral. But what I noticed about Christians and all the websites that came up, they'll give you an example of exegesis and eisegesis by using a passage from the Old Testament or the New Testament. For example, when you read Matthew's infancy narrative, it says that he was visited by wise men or magi from the east, right? But a lot of people say he was visited by kings. No translation of the Bible from the Koine Greek uses the word kings. It's not in there. So if you say that, you're practicing eisegesis. You're inserting a preconceived notion or a belief rather than reading what the text actually says. Okay? Another good example is when we say Adam and Eve ate the apple in the Garden of Eden. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say apple. It says fruit. Okay, we're inserting our own beliefs and notions into that. So that's eisegesis, which is the next subject I want to bring up. How were you taught to read the Bible? A lot of Christians, in fact, most of the Christians that I've seen on the internet and on YouTube and in my personal life too, have been taught to read the Bible like this. Start with the New Testament. Okay? Read John and Romans first, and then go back and read Genesis and Exodus. Whatever you do, don't read Leviticus and Numbers. It's too complicated, it's too boring, and you can read that later on anyways. Another person says to read Luke and Acts first, and then go back to Genesis and Exodus. Basically, they want to teach you about Jesus first. Okay, that's the single most important thing, is understanding Jesus, and don't worry so much about the Old Testament. It's big, it's old, it's complicated. You know, you got to accept Jesus and believe in him and have faith in him, and then we'll go back and we'll teach you some stuff about the Old Testament. Another guy says to read like one or two passages from Genesis and then read the first chapter of Matthew and then read the first chapter of Acts. And I'm like, that's kind of like watching 3 minutes of your favorite television show every night and thinking that you're going to come away with a good understanding of it. So who reads the Bible like that? Certainly not me. I mean, I was familiar with the Bible growing up for the first 40 some odd years of my life, and then the last time somebody gave me a Bible, the New International Version, or NIV, I don't know if you can see that with the sunlight on it there, and it doesn't even say the Holy Bible, it's just called the Bible. And so I picked it up, and what I did would make all missionaries cringe. First, I read the back of it, and then I opened it up, and I started reading it from the beginning. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I realized that was called the Torah. And I thought, what language was it written in? It was written in Hebrew, so I went back and started to learn Hebrew. And then I realized that the Old Testament was called the Tanakh, and that consisted of 3 different sections. The Torah, and then there was the prophets, and then the third section of the Bible is called the writing. Furthermore, when we read this Bible in English, I noticed that the Christians came along and they changed the order of the Old Testament. They took Ruth and Chronicles out of the writings and they stuck them, before the prophets, because it makes it more chronological that way. But it changes the very basics of the Bible. And God says not to change his words. I don't think we should change the order of his books either. So what I did, and this makes missionaries cringe, is I read it in order first. So when I read the Bible in order, and I started to learn Hebrew, I asked other questions. Well, what was the political, socio-economic climate, whatever? And we realized that the Jews were surrounded by pagan nations like Egypt and Greece and Rome, and they all had various pagan gods, multiple gods. And they believed in, sacrifice and dying and rising gods, and gods being born of virgins and dying and rising, things like that. Of course, Christians will tell you that Jesus is not a pagan religion, and that it's actually, all those pagan religions were a foreshadowing of the real truth of Jesus. Do with that what you will. Anyway, and if I read the Old Testament first, what I come away with is God is one. He detests human sacrifice. He detests drinking blood and eating human flesh. He pretty much doesn't want you to do anything that they do in the New Testament. Okay, but you won't pick that up if you start, we'll read the New Testament here first and then come back over to here. A friend of mine, an old co-worker, recommended that I read a study Bible by a guy named Charles F. Stanley, and I started to do that, and I noticed right away from the very first page of Genesis, he's trying to indoctrinate us with the Trinity. And then when you get to the Garden of Eden, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the most craftiest beast of all, they tell you that that's our first introduction to Satan. So basically, they're coming at you with stuff from the New Testament and inserting it into the Old Testament. I hope you learned something and you have a nice day.